Hi, welcome to another lesson. In this lesson, we are going to look at what is called object-oriented programming in PHP. In our last lesson, we talked about functions, where I told us that we have a block of code being represented with a single name, such as a function name. Taking for instance, we have a function which is some value. It takes two parameters and add those two parameters together. If you have an operation, taking for instance, you want to create an automated teller machine, say ATM. So when you know in ATM, when you go there, you see menu, withdraw, change pin, transfer, check balance, and all that. And you click on the button, and then this button performs whatever operation you want it to do. So also, we can say each button is a function, because when you press, everything that has to do with whatever you press will happen within that function. Say withdraw. If you want to withdraw, we can say we have a function called withdraw. This function will take things. It will take your card number. Take your card number, PIN, and when it takes your card number PIN, then it go ahead and look for other information in the database and allow you to do what? To perform your withdrawal. You'll be able to get your account balance, check whether the amount you want to withdraw is not it's up to what you have in your bank accounts. So some other things are actually taking place in the case of ATM, but I just use that as an example in this case, that okay, for each function is every operation you want to perform, you can group it as a function. Now, in the case of object-oriented programming, where you now have so many functions that are related, then we group all those functions into another parent group called class. That is what we take us to object-oriented programming. What is a class? A class is an object. Class is an object. Taking for instance, you want to create, let's say a human being is an object for instance, and you want to create something that looks like this person, human being, this person object. You want to create something that looks at this person object. So the first thing you look at is, what are the characteristics of this person? The characteristics are what? The person will have name, age, height, and some other things. Then, what are the functions this person can perform? The behavior. Function is also a behavior. So what are the functions this person can perform? You are going to have a function work, function eat, function sleep. All of them will be inside the person object, and that is why I said a class is an object. Taking for instance, you want to create an application that will look like a car. You know, the first thing you look at is that how does a car, what are the behavior, what are the characteristics of a car? Then you group all of them together and name it a class of car. For example, let's demonstrate something. We're going to create a file, here. See, I click on new file, and then I will call it OP class PHP. Okay, so now inside this class, I said the first thing we'll do is that we create a class. Let's say we have, in the case of this person, we have class. In PHP, you proceed with class and then you put the name. So if I say class person, it is a standard that you capitalize the first letter of a class name. Then we can now have this. Okay, so now what are the attributes that we have? As mentioned here, right the other time, name, age, and height. So we're going to have it as public name, public name is equal to, let's say we have it as Johnson. Then we're going to have three parameters. So this will be age. Age, might quote it, might not quote it. 23. Height. We say 6 feet. Okay. Now we have, these are the characteristics. So what are the functions this person can perform? If you look at the image, the person can walk, eat, and sleep. So we'll create a function eat. You know, a function, you might not need to capitalize it, but make sure it is unique. Okay, function eat. And what will this one do? Say echo eating. Then we have another function, and then the third function work, and function what? Sleep. Okay, so this one will be walking, sleeping. Okay, now we have created the person object. So these are variables. We just give them access specifier, which is public. We have public, we have private, we have protected. If it is public, that means it can be accessed anywhere. If it is protected, that means it cannot be accessed just anyhow outside the class, but it will be accessed inside the derived class. When it is private, that means it can only be accessed inside the class only. Okay, so we have the class objects. So how do we access all this? We have to do what? We create an instance of that object. Or let me say, for instance, you create an image of that. Let me give you an example. We all believe that the belief is that God created human being in his own image. That means we are an instance of God. So taking for instance, if I should say variable Jane is equal to new person object. What I'm saying in this case is that the whole of this object person is now inside the variable Jane. I've created instance of that person as Jane, where I can now say Jane is what? Work. That is, James will be working. Before we do that, let me comment it and load this page to see that nothing is going to display. If I go to localhost, my app / OOP class. Okay, yes, it showed everything we have typed because we did not wrap all what we are doing inside the PHP. So I will have to wrap it inside PHP and close the PHP down here. So if we go on now and reload, then nothing is showing. Alright, so now if I now go back and uncomment my Jane work, that is a function work, what do we have in this case? We have working, because we have used the object to access the function. We can as well use it to access the variables inside the class. Taking for instance, if I say Jane name, what is the name of Jane? If we do this now, because this name we are accessing doesn't have echo, unlike this function, because this function has echo, that is why we can just call the function directly. But this Jane, it won't do anything because we need to echo that. See, nothing happened, so we need to echo that. I'll go to the end and say echo Jane name. So let's see what the name of our object is, Johnson. So that is how we access the object inside the function. Now, apart from doing this, we now have what is called inheritance. Inheritance. Those are the pillars of one of the pillars of OOP. Inheritance simply means when a base class, or let me say a child derived class, inherits from a parent base class. Let me say this one, it has to do with something like when we say DNA. We all know that all of us, we have one or two things that we inherit from our parents. So in this case, if you have a class that inherits the property of another class, that is what is called inheritance. Taken for instance, if I should create another class here, say class maybe student for instance, extends person. What this means is that all these properties, these functions and attributes, they are already been passed down to students. So in this case, Student will have a name, Johnson. He will have his age, 23. He will have his height, 6 feet, and he will be able to eat, work, and sleep. As it extends person, he already has access to all that. So if there's anyone we don't want these students to have access to, then we change the access specifier here from public to maybe private. Okay, so now that the student has access to it, yet we may have what is called override. You can have the same function inside this student that will override whatever function he has inherited. This is a typical example. Let's say your father loves tennis, so you inherit that sport, tennis, from your father, but you have passion for football. So your own passion has overwritten what you inherited from your father, which is what? Tennis. That is just the example. Alright, so now let us see how the student inherits things from person. In that case, the student will have his own name, at least, age, and height. So the student name is James. His own age is 12 and 4.5. Alright. Now, if we now come out and create object of that student, say Jack is student. So in this case, Jack can work without having to inherit, without having to have that in his own context. Let us check. Can Jack work? Error. We have undefined variable Jack. Yeah, we have not created the instance of Jack. We just call it directly. Sorry, made mistake. Okay, so Jack is equal to new student this time around, not person. It's a new student. So then Jack work. Okay, so now let's see what happens. That's it. Jack is working, whereas he doesn't have work function inside his own context, but he has inherited that from the parent. All right. So now the application of this is that, let's say for instance, you are creating an application, maybe a school application for instance, and then you have a function for users where you keep all the information about user, or maybe a person where you keep first name, last name, age, the list of kin, and everything like that inside the person object. But you have another class which is for students like this. Inside that student, the only thing they do is something that has to do with what makes them a student, but they are going to inherit with other things from the person, maybe name and all that. But maybe as a student, that's where you put the course they belong to, the department they belong to, and other things like that. So when you are doing this, whenever you need to create a student, student will inherit first name, last name, every other basic information from person. And then when you create a lecturer object as well, the lecturer object too will have the same information as the student in the person. First name, last name, all those basic information, you will inherit it so that you don't have to rewrite things over and over again. That's the purpose of making use of object-oriented programming, OOP. You don't have to repeat yourself. You type a code once and then you start to reuse those things. Alright, so that is that on inheritance and object-oriented programming. Now, furthermore, we have what is called constructor. Constructor. What is a constructor in object-oriented programming? Constructor is what is used to initialize a class. Taking for instance, let me look at constructor as like a banner. Say for instance, I want to go into an eatery, and then let's say KFC for instance, or Chicken Republic. As you are approaching their building, you will see the banner in front of their office that says welcome to Chicken Republic or welcome to KFC. So whenever you approach that, you see the board. Whenever you approach that, you see the board. So that means that board is what is used to initialize the company. Taking for instance, if I say here, we have our constructor. Let's see what happens if we put it here. Okay, let it be after all this. Now, if I say function underscore construct, and then we come here and say echo welcome to our app. Okay, now if I refresh this, you can see I get it, welcome to our app, and then it now says working. Why am I getting it? Have I called the function? No, I haven't called it, but because it's the first thing you see, immediately you create an object of a class. Even if I did not call this working, if I don't call work function, if I load it, constructor will run. See, even now, if I remove the initialization, this one, what I used to create the object, nothing will happen because we have not. This is like, okay, we have not approached Chicken Republic. We cannot see the banner. But once we approach it, like if you create an instance of that class, then constructor fires. So now, what's the use of constructor? You can use constructor to you can use it to create maybe a variable, an object that needs to load whenever your application is launched. Taking for instance, connection to the database will be inside the constructor, because anytime your application loads to fetch data, it needs to connect to the database, and you don't want to start calling this function every time now and then you put it inside your constructor, so that whenever the application launches, then the constructor is initialized and it connects to the database without calling another function to connect to the database separately. So that is what a constructor is. In PHP we have destructor. Destructor is when you initialize something, you use destructor to clear it, to deinitialize that. So that is that on object-oriented programming. Don't forget, I said the constructor is used to initialize a class or an object. You can make use of it to for instance, connect to the database and do all sort. Thank you.